Hi, my name is K.Thomas, W1DED. Today I have with me Bob Inderbitzen, NQ1R. Bob has been with the ARRL for 32 years, so it's not an understatement to say that he understands the organization, he knows where they've been, and he certainly knows where they're going. Per usual, the ARRL has been in the forefront of many of our minds as they tackle some pretty big issues approaching 2024 and beyond, necessary changes that happen in a lot of for-profit and not-for-profit companies. I asked Bob to join me today so that we could talk about those changes and how we came to it and how they're going to unfold. Bob, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Kevin. This is great to be here.
And I presume you are at the ARRL headquarters in Newington.
I am. I'm in the ARRL media room, which, 20 years ago, to imagine that we'd have a room devoted to media, it baffles my mind where we are today, but this is all part of ARRL's digital transformation.
Which brings me to your title. You're the Director of Marketing and Innovation. I love that. I mean, I know a lot of directors of marketing. I know no directors of innovation. So tell me about that. What's the meaning behind the title?
Yeah, innovation's loaded. It really means that I have an opportunity to infuse both experience and product development into the organization. And while sometimes the ideas are my own, oftentimes I'm working with other people's ideas to develop them. What's that for ARRL? A new program, a new service, a new benefit, a new something that we sell. There's lots of things that we can develop for ARRL in terms of product development. So that's just a loaded, innovation is just loaded for product development.
So Bob, I've done my homework. You got licensed in the 6th grade. You went to Worcester Polytech. And then I think you started ARRL at the ARRL immediately after. Is that correct?
Yeah, I did a lot of playing radio in college at WPI, and I did not finish my degree there, but I went a lot longer than my parents wanted to support me for, based on my grades at the time. So I put in 3.5 years at Worcester Polytech. ARRL actually helped me finish my degree as part of a continuing education program long after I started working at ARRL. I pursued a degree in management organization for nonprofits. So I both have a little basis of engineering and a whole lot of basis of management experience.
So when did you first get it in your head that you might want to work for the ARRL? Did that happen in the 7th grade, or was that later on while you were in college?
Yeah. So, I want to start with just a really short, fun story. After I got my amateur radio license, QST magazine showed up in my home because ham radio operators would give me their copies. And my grandmother saw that magazine and was looking for an Easter gift for me. And so she signed me up for ARRL membership. Well, I followed QST magazine and ARRL membership like crazy for years, but it became much more than just a subscription to QST when my dad helped me find a Heathkit SB102 in a TV repair shop as a grade school student. I bought it with my paper route money, and it didn't have a manual. So I wrote a handwritten letter to ARRL as a member, and I said, boy, can you help me find the manual for the Heathkit SB102? And about a week later, a manila envelope showed up. My parents handed it off to me, and it was an entire photostat of the SB102 operating and construction manual, compliments of the ARRL laboratory, with a short note in there suggesting that my parents might make a small donation to help cover the cost.
I love that story.
At that point, I really started to realize that the value of being an active ham in the community meant having somebody in your corner, and ARRL was in my corner for many reasons throughout the years, but joining the staff was an easy decision when I saw the job opening.
So what was that? What was that job opening in 1991 when you first started?
1991. Well, back then, you had to wait for the magazine to show up in your mailbox to find job openings at ARRL. So imagine those positions being open for an entire publication cycle. and there was an opening in the VEC department, the ARRL VEC, as the assistant to the manager. And a fellow by the name of Bart Yankee, who's still on the ARRL staff today, hired me during that interview to be his assistant in the VEC. So most of my experience in those early years of working at ARRL came from working with volunteers. So I developed a keen sense of the importance of the relationship between the staff and our volunteers, who are the lifeblood of the organization.
So I'm curious how the organization internally has changed over those 3 decades. Who are the CEOs that you worked under? And just tell us a little bit about the difference in style between those CEOs.
Sure. Well, for most of my time as a member, and then when I joined the staff, Dave Sumner, K1ZZ, was the CEO, the chief executive officer. It became. Also, the CEO fills the role of secretary for the organization as well. Working for Dave was a fantastic experience. As a junior member of the staff for much of my time while I was at on the staff here under Dave's leadership. My contact wasn't with Dave so much day to day, but really with my colleagues in my departments and across other members of the management team. Dave's a good friend, was a great leader for the organization, and it was super to work alongside him for so long. In more recent years, I probably have grown to appreciate much of Dave's work in the area of advocacy, and which he continues to do from a mentoring role with the IARU, the International Amateur Radio Union. After Dave's retirement, we had a couple of other CEOs. You know, their time with us was short. The organization hadn't brought in a chief executive officer for a very, very long time. Didn't actually, I think, didn't actually know exactly what we were looking for. And now David's been here for over 3 years, and he's been fantastic to work with. We both share a passion for amateur radio, and with David, I've actually gotten a sense to know what it's like also to operate on the air with him. He's extremely passionate and dedicated radio sport enthusiast, and so I've been able to contest at his contest station with his friends from Bonaire a couple of times this year, and it's been a great experience. And we had a couple of CEOs between Dave and David, NA2AA. They were here for a short time. I have to say, after you've been on a staff as long as I have, you got to be around long enough for me to actually remember much of what your contribution was.
Well, Bob, in a minute, we're going to talk about some of the challenges that the ARRL is facing today and into the future. But I'm curious, over those 3 decades, what were some of the challenges you faced or the organization faced over that time?
I think it's important to remember that ARRL is small, and the amateur radio community, as a wider community, is small. And that's one of the challenges, is doing anything on an economies of scale. Always it starts off with this very relatively small community. As big as we sometimes feel of ourselves, you go to an event like Dayton Hamvention or Orlando Hamcation, and you see thousands of ham radio operators out there. In the grand scheme of things, the number of people participating as radio amateurs in the world is a relatively small number, and ARRL's take of that community, largely domestically in the U.S., although we have about 9,000 international members, is fairly small. You could. David often says you could fill a couple of college football stadiums with him, and that's about it. Barely, not even fill. So you have to do a lot rather leanly in order to maintain a membership product like that. And an organization that's 109 years old doesn't let go of things very easily. So one of the things I've come to learn is we're good at introducing new benefits. We're not good at sunsetting or discontinuing benefits, because there's always somebody or somebodies who are still utilizing some of those benefits that you'll disappoint disenfranchised. But then the march of amateur radio and technology and the world move on, and if you want, unless you want to be a dinosaur, you do have to constantly innovate. And so internally, significant milestones were often related with computer systems. Membership record keeping moved from safes with printed index cards into mainframe systems like the IBM System 38, an old Honeywell system that the organization had, and then desktop software that sat on a box in a room being kept climate controlled for a long time, and now cloud-based. So, membership record keeping and how much you know about a member from both their transaction standpoint, but also the relationship you want to have with members becomes super important for the organization. So those were key milestones. Publishing milestones, very significant for the organization as well. For the first 100 years, QST dominates that story, and books like the ARRL Handbook and the ARRL Antenna Book. But then in 2012, ARRL introduces the digital edition of QST. So that's 10 plus years ago now. We introduced a digital magazine to members. Why? Because we knew that the world was changing, and we didn't want to be a dinosaur, and we knew we had to have a foot in both sides of the equation, both print and digital. And so we introduced the digital edition of the magazine. It's changed platforms a couple of times. It sits on a platform right now called PageSuite, and that platform supports other major magazines in the world, but also QST. A couple of years later, we introduced On the Air magazine as a new publication for members, particularly beginner to intermediate level members. And we made the decision to introduce that as an option in print for members who preferred to get that versus QST delivered to them. But we decided to give it to all members in that digital magazine platform that was already serving QST. We decided to give it to all members so that they'd have access to it if they wanted to enjoy both. So now, at that point, we end up with 2 digital magazines. We produced NCJ, the National Contest Journal, and QEX, the technical journal that we produced for many years in print. But a couple of years ago, we decided to include those magazines in the membership benefits package for all members. So if you go to the digital magazine platform today, it includes QST, On the Air, QEX, and NCJ. And then just 2 years ago, we introduced a learning platform, much like colleges and universities have a learning platform to teach online classes remotely. We recognized that for some members, finding information that will help them fast track themselves as active hams is not always a radio club in your backyard. There's some really vibrant radio clubs around the country, and then we have a big country with a lot of holes also. And some radio clubs that aren't as good as other radio clubs. So the experience is sort of depends on who the leaders are and how committed they are to nurturing newcomers. And so we decided to smooth some of those rough edges out by producing a learning platform populated with content, public service, technology content, operating content, all different things, especially for newcomers, but also there's content there to help you become active in FT8. In some respects, the YouTube community, like yourself, Kevin, are following a parallel track with that. And I often will say that the YouTubers were to that space even before ARRL for sure. You found an audience right away in ham radio operators who comb the internet looking for good content to help them become more active in amateur radio. The problem that exists is that that also opens itself up to entrants who are well qualified or not qualified at all. And so you sort of have to weed through that. And so ARRL has a highly curated learning center with some of the best contributors, subject matter experts of content. So that was a new benefit we introduced. So we've done a lot to add new benefits. Radio sport is another space where we've added new award programs. Logbook of the World is today something that Could you have even imagined that we would have been digital QSLing 30 years ago? And now it's become a routine part of award hunting, is uploading your logs to Logbook of the World. We try to do all of that and advocacy with a relatively low-cost membership product for hams who are committed to becoming active in this hobby or service.
Not too long ago, there was a survey that was sent to ARRL members, and it covered a lot of ground. I thought it was very well done. Tell me about the genesis of that. What was the discussion within the ARRL that you need to have a survey? And was it an intentional precursor for ideas that were already sort of in the works, or was it truly to gauge interest? Tell me about the genesis of the survey and what the ARRL hoped to learn from that.
So increasingly, because of rising costs associated with postage and printing over the last few years, but in particular, it's on the fast track to becoming extremely volatile, especially in the post-coronavirus era of supply chain issues. We've been faced with the hardship that the print magazine is starting to dominate a significant part of the dues proposition. And the organization doesn't have an appetite for raising dues every year. Let's face it, we're not one of those organizations. And I can't even blame anybody, because we follow this very infrequent practice since day one with ARRL of infrequently raising dues. And when we knew we were faced with some sort of dues increase, largely to deal with both the fact that postage is starting to outpace its predictable behavior, but printing had become significantly volatile. One of the things that we heard from members over the last 10 years since introducing the digital edition was, why do I have to pay for a print magazine when I don't read a print magazine? Can I save a couple of dollars if I voluntarily cancel my print subscription? We wanted to wrap our heads around just what was happening with the reading preference of our members. And so that was the genesis of the survey that was conducted over the summer. I have a little running commentary with David, our CEO. I usually say anytime we can get about 2,000, 3,000 members to respond to something, a new program, a new benefit, a new service, that 2,000, 3,000 members is sort of my sweet spot to say we're on the right track. We got 20,000 members to respond to this particular survey conducted over the course of a month. And it gave us a lot of data. It gave us a lot of write-in data too, stories, concern that the organization was going to change in some way. People defended positions. They were almost position statements that some of them came in on. We read every single one of them. David read every single one of them. But one of the things that we learned from that survey was that QST is a valuable benefit. Don't get rid of the print magazine, and that reading preferences were changing significantly. It's not even fair to say that young people are the digital readers. I think people find themselves where they have a personal preference, digital or print or hybrid. And for every older member that told me older members don't want you to do anything with the print magazine, there was an older member that responded, I read everything digitally. My spouse told me to get rid of all my print magazines years ago. I don't even read them. I download the issues onto my tablet. I take them to the airport with me when I'm traveling for work, or when I go to club meetings, I have access to all your back issues at the club meeting. So I'm the go-to person in my club for pulling up old articles. We learned a lot. There's certainly the statistical data, and getting responses from 20,000 members pushes you way over the sample that we needed to make strong decisions. But it was the write-in data too, and the compelling stories that placed us on this path. I don't want to sell short though. The paper industry pushed us in this direction too, and it started well before this year. In the spring this past year, we had an issue where the printer, one of the largest printers in the world, prints QST magazine, came to us and said, "We don't have paper to print QST this month. Supply chain issues." We went back to them and said, "Well, what kind of paper do you have?" And they gave us some options, but all of them involved a delay to delivering QST. And if you know anything about ARRL, we are deadline driven and we do not shirk our deadlines. And so working with our contacts at the paper printing company, we went to market for the printer and found paper on a very short straw, $40,000 extra in 1 month, and we were able to fulfill the magazine on time. There's another magazine that's out there, Kevin, and we think that they're really good to be out there in the amateur radio community, and that's CQ magazine. Strictly a print subscription. It's not a membership organization. A lot of members subscribe to CQ, and they're good for amateur radio and even good for ARRL to be out there. But when they can't fulfill the magazine, they just stop. They don't send the magazine, and that's happened at least a few times. In fact, we know because members will contact us and say, "I didn't get my CQ magazine. What can you do about it?" They look to ARRL as the problem solver of everything in amateur radio, even when it's not our publishing problem. That's a $62 a year print subscription. ARRL membership is right now a $49, and in January a $59 value proposition that you get a whole lot more than just a print magazine. We just had a really important decision to make, and we did the homework over the last 10 years in order to set ourselves up pretty well for that decision. What does this mean in a few years, Kevin? I don't know. How long we'll be printing printed magazines, but I can tell you that if you're starting a membership organization today, in any industry, amateur radio, a hobby, an advocacy group, most organizations don't turn to a print magazine as part of that membership package anymore. It's just too expensive unless the advertising industry is completely shouldering the cost of that, and we don't have that in amateur radio or with ARRL.
So Bob, I wonder if you can be more specific about the survey results. I guess I didn't realize that you had so many responses. 20,000, that's incredible. What did the math tell you? What percentage of membership, if you extrapolate it, wanted a print publication versus digital only?
Okay, Kevin. So as a result of the DEW survey, which we published the results to members online, you can find it on the ARRL website under the membership tab, and the slide deck of the survey results are there. But question 1 asked that members receive all 4 magazines in a digital format if they were available as separate print. If we were to separate the printed magazine from being included in the base membership, would you still choose to receive it? And about 39% said they would go digital only. About 43% said they wanted a print magazine included with their membership. And another 18% said they'd pay more to add a printed magazine to their membership. So that was one of the questions in that survey that provided us with some sense that things were changing.
So if we extrapolate that, which I think we can at 20,000 responses, nearly 50% of the membership did want a printed magazine.
That's right. And so it'll be interesting to see just how that dynamic changes once members are in a period of time right now where some are choosing to add a print subscription to their remaining term of membership, and some members are trying to use the digital edition for the very first time. I think the the latter super important, trying the digital edition, because as we start to look at what ARRL's digital transformation means in publishing, you're going to start to see that the amount of content that we have produced in a digital magazine is going to start to outpace significantly what a member would see in print. Perfect example are operating modes, right? If you want to share what an operating mode sounds like with a member on a printed page of a magazine, you can do that in a digital edition today. You can't do that in a print magazine. If you want to embellish an article involving a construction article with some helpful video tips, you can do that in a digital publication. You can't do that in the print publication. If you want to make a change based on an FCC matter, ARRL's very involved in advocacy, and we're undergoing right now an instance where the symbol rate requirement has just been removed from the FCC rules. We're waiting for them actually to appear in the rules, but the report and order came from the FCC with the good news after 10 long years that a proposal made from ARRL to eliminate the symbol rate would happen. In doing that, frequency charts are going to change when they have notes and indicators involving the prior requirement. So when you print a digital publication, you can swap in a new frequency chart when we get more frequencies. There's a lot we can do there that we just can't do in a print magazine, and that's going to happen increasingly. And so one of the things we don't want to happen is to leave any member out of this entirely. So while we're continuing to print the print publication, a significant goal is to migrate more members over to the digital edition so they can see what they're missing out on, frankly.
So the thread I'm trying to follow is 50% of the membership, let's call it 48% because that's more exact, 48% of the membership does want a printed publication. Only 18% are willing to pay for it. You guys do the math, the ARRL does the math. Okay, it just doesn't work. I mean, if more than 18% want to pay for it, that might be different. But if they don't, they're just not the funds here to do it. So again, the thread that I'm following is you look at those statistics, and even though we're left with 30% of the membership that are going to be unhappy, you just can't afford to. So we're moving ahead without the printed publication unless you want to pay for more. Roughly, there's 30 to 33% of the membership that are unhappy, which brings me to my point in the thread. I'm sure you're dealing with these phone calls and people that are disgruntled and upset. I've seen some of it on social media, unfortunately, but it's not unfortunate that they're on social media. So I think social media is an unfortunate venue at times. However, I mean they're raising, at least for themselves, legitimate discussion points. How is the ARRL dealing with those ongoing concerns? I mean, I've heard things from, for example, my membership with the ARRL doesn't expire till February 2024, but yet I'm going to stop getting my printed copy. That's one that I've heard. But again, I'm sure you have the list. I don't have to read them off for you. How are you dealing with those individual questions and concerns? Because obviously 33% of the membership is substantial. That's 50,000 people.
Yeah. So again, part of this has to go back to, I hope in 5 or 10 years, I don't use the word digital so much, right? Because the world is digital. And so much of what we're surrounded by in amateur radio are logging software, websites that we use like QRZ, to look up call signs. Remember the old call books that we used to pour through to look up call signs? Yeah. So, but you specifically asked, what am I doing to respond to members who are upset or unhappy with this change? And so, I would say we're being thoughtful. We're using this as an opportunity to remind members that they're not subscribing to just a magazine. I take take myself all the way back to those days of my grandmother signing me up for a magazine subscription. She thought all kids should have a magazine subscription. But then very quickly, as I started becoming an active ham, I found out that ARRL was much more than just QST magazine. There was a resource there when I needed to talk to a laboratory or ask a rules and regulations question. There were other publications and materials that they produced. So we're reminding people what the suite of benefits includes. If you were sort of to digest ARRL into two major things that the organization does, it's promote amateur radio, and that's letting the world know what amateur radio is, that it's the breadboard for learning about radio communications and radio technology, for serving your community with wireless, for developing skills, all of that in radio. There's that part of it. But promoting amateur radio also means developing those people who are already in the community to meet our obligations of the service. And so again, when you become a member of the organization, I think that while some members may take it for granted, there's a bucket filled with benefits and services that round you out as an active amateur radio operator. So that's promote. The other side is protect. And that's another one that falls off the radar very easily, is all the areas in amateur radio where ARRL's role in 24/7 vigilance becomes really important. This month is the World Radio Communications Conference in Dubai, and ARRL is paying to ensure that there are people both from ARRL and the International Amateur Radio Union who are there at that meeting in Dubai. You know, things like flying to Dubai is not cheap. Putting people up for many weeks in hotels for an International Telecommunications Union conference is expensive because everybody else is in town for the same conference. That comes out in part from dues, but also from members who contribute beyond dues. It would be wrong for me to say that dues supports everything that we do. It's operated so leanly that we rely on advertising revenue, fundraising for spectrum defense, a lot of things. So promote and protect amateur radio become part of the story I've been talking to people about, and sort of reminding them where are the places that you find yourself utilizing ARRL benefits. Was it the phone call to the ARRL VEC to renew your amateur radio license on a complicated FCC website, where there's a staff member sitting there all the time, willing to help you through that process? Was it talking to our RFI expert in the ARRL laboratory about a nuisance RFI problem involving a improperly installed ground? And that staff person led you through some resources, but also connected you with somebody in your community that can help you out? Was it your enjoyment of an event held annually like Field Day, where ARRL wraps ARRL Field Day in this big ribbon every year with media resources and opportunities to help clubs get the most out of Field Day? You know, when you start to look at all the different touch points that a member might have, an active amateur radio operator might have in amateur radio, those benefits really start to become important. But members also want to know, did you break a contract? No, we didn't break a contract. You know, we actually sought, as most board meetings, we have volunteer counsel, we have general counsel that provides ARRL with answers that we need when it involves the board's responsibility, the governance of the organization. And so we were able to ask counsel, is membership a contract? No, it's not a contract. Your benefit suite changes constantly. Have you ever subscribed to a streaming television service and a channel that you had went away, but they added 3 new services? You know, that happens midterm in your relationship with a company. And again, we're an organization that often adds much more than takes away. So this was a hard one to decide on, but fits well with this commitment we have to the organization's digital transformation. And we're going to do everything that we can to help members who do not want to pay for the print magazine to access that digital edition for the first time. I helped somebody this morning with just their login to the ARRL website. They said, I've never logged into the ARRL website, but I want to see what all this is all about. And so I spent the next 40 minutes helping a member create a password and a username. And they said, oh, and you have newsletters too. I didn't know you had all these things that I've been missing. So I guess that's the point. What are all the things you've been missing if you don't have that sort of digital relationship with ARRL that involves e-newsletters, content for members only on the website, and now additional content in the magazines.
So, Bob, your answers are generating a lot of questions here. So, I'm going to try to get through a few of them. One that's in my mind is, I understand the protect and promote legs of the stool. Are you suggesting that membership forgot that those were being provided? Did they take them for granted? And I guess I asked that both quantifiably. What do you learn in the survey that a large percentage of responders did recognize and appreciate that? And what about anecdotally? Did you see people appreciating it, or do you think people forgot and took it for granted?
I take this one very closely because I wear this marketing hat, this leadership marketing hat in the organization. And I'm reminded constantly throughout this process that we can do so much more to remind members of their benefits and services. And the importance of why we do that is not because I'm trying to make a case for a $49 or $59 membership. It's because we know that people who have a high utilization of ARRL benefits become active hams. We've done plenty of surveys over the years of FCC license data and ARRL membership data. And every time we do those surveys, they always point to the fact that ARRL members are among the most active. They are the active members of this big community. Just recently, Kevin, we learned that stock trading interests have some significant interest in the spectrum associated with 20 meters. They would like to operate right up against the amateur radio spectrum, and by all accounts, from what our laboratory researched, they would bleed into that. When that piece came out in the FCC news engine, and all the different amateur radio news organizations picked that up, the first thing that people started to say in the social media communities was, what's ARRL going to do? Where's ARRL? What are they going to do? And what was really funny, because I'm close enough to this in this small community, Kevin, that I'm not afraid to take a call sign off of social media and put it in our database and see if they're a member. Some of those loudest voices were not ARRL members. So the immediate reaction is, what's ARRL doing? And I'm not even a member, so I just hope you're all doing something on the backs of paying members. This was a reminder for us that for many in the amateur radio community, this service, this avocation is not something that they eat, sleep, and drink all the time. And so their once a month trip to the mailbox to get QST may have been that single touch point that they had with the organization. It's not enough to be an active ham and go to your mailbox and get your copy of QST and call it a day. We want you to consume some of the latest content across our magazines. We want you to follow weekly newsletters like the ARRL letter that comes out every Thursday to understand the pulse in amateur radio right now and what activities are going on. We want you to roll up your sleeves and take some courses in the ARRL Learning Center and learn a new operating mode that you haven't used before, or join the amateur radio service and take some of our MCOM courses and serve your community in some of the fundamental ways that we say as a service we're going to do as a body for this country. Another area is education outreach. A lot of what ARRL does with school teachers to bring amateur radio in the classroom needs to be paid for somehow. And we know that members worry about the next generation of hams. So I've been telling a story to people who've reached out to me directly that Are you worried about the future of amateur radio? Without a doubt, most loyal members, longtime hams, are worried about who's going to take their seat somewhere down the line. I think that's a wonderful legacy that amateur radio has, is that we're always worried about who's going to be the next ham. ARRL is in that seat, nurturing that all the time. I'm right now, I'm the advisor of the ARRL Collegiate Amateur Radio Program. Members say, there's no young people in my radio club. Amateur radio is on its way out the door because there's no young people in my amateur radio club. Yes, there's no amateur radio operators in your radio club, but let me tell you about the spaces where they are participating. ARRL has been nurturing since 2017 a network of college amateur radio clubs around the United States. Universities like Case Western Reserve, MIT, WPI, Cal Poly, UMich, University of Texas, Austin. There are hundreds of active amateur radio clubs in the United States, and ARRL has woven a string through them by providing an opportunity for them to meet monthly. And we've even brought them some resources for career opportunities. Motorola came to ARRL last year and had 22 job openings. And they said, can we meet with your collegiate amateur radio community? We'd like to fill those positions with hams. Hams? Why do you want to fill position openings at Motorola with hams? The two hiring people said, because we're hams and we know the value of having amateur radio operators doing some of the analog engineering that's at some of the forefront of what we do out of Schaumburg, Illinois. And so this happens quite often, where ARRL is the facilitator of connecting young people with both opportunities to imagine pursuing wireless technology communications degrees or jobs when they're finished with school. Again, part of it is beating that drum, Kevin, loud and over and over and over in different ways. And so speaking with you, for instance, today is another opportunity for ARRL to get the message out that because of members, we're able to do so much.
Bob, I want to take you back to the digital platform, which you've talked about a lot, and no one can be in disagreement that this is the way we're all trending, whatever industry you're in. What does that look like now for the ARRL? What is the, let's take web hits per month. How many visitors do you have to the ARRL website? And specifically within that website, how many people on a monthly basis are accessing the online publications, or let's just generally call it ARRL news? What can you tell me about that?
Well, I don't have all those numbers, but I have some. I can tell you, for instance, that the ARRL letter on Thursdays is one of ARRL's largest distribution lists for the organization, with over 100,000 people subscribing to receive the ARRL letter on Thursdays. That's a really, really big one. We have a lot of other e-newsletters. Not many of them come up as close to that 100,000 mark as the ARRL letter does. And it's still surprising to me that some members don't even know that we have that. But if you're a member of ARRL, you can visit the ARRL.org/my ARRL page and opt into e-newsletters like the weekly ARRL letter. That's a really big one. I don't have the statistics, the Google Analytics, or the statistics on the on how members consume the digital edition of QST, but the information's shared closely with ARRL advertisers who pay to be in QST, and of course they're interested in what this means for their ads. One of the things that you're going to start to see is ARRL modeling some better behavior on our own internal advertising pages. You know, if we sell a copy of the handbook in QST, we want to do some really cool things with that advertising to demonstrate to a largely unsophisticated advertising community in amateur radio. I mean, there's some big leaders in advertising, but there's also some very small advertisers in QST that don't have advertising shops, and they rely on ARRL to sort of model the best way to get the most out of their space in QST. So we'll start to do some things there at the same time that we're concentrating on the editorial side of the equation, where you'll see additional content for product reviews, construction articles, audio video additions to the magazine. Thus, there should be much more there. So I don't have the analytics per se that I can share with you from the digital edition, but all things change on January 1st, right? We end up in this sharp cutoff where really we want to see a lot of members try that digital edition. Even if you're going to continue to subscribe to the print edition, I'm telling you, you're missing out on part of that story in amateur radio if you're not following the digital edition of the magazine as well.
Bob, I appreciate you taking time today. And I especially appreciate that you're facing these challenges head on. I know from personal experience in business, whether it be for-profit or nonprofit, things are always shifting, always changing. There's a bottom line that needs to be met. And in your case, you have 150,000 members breathing down your neck, wanting different things, sometimes the same thing. But again, I appreciate that you're stepping up to that challenge for 32 years. Hopefully it's another 20. I've been talking to Bob Inderbitzen, NQ1R from the ARRL headquarters in Newington, Connecticut. Thank you again, Bob.
Thank you, Kevin. This was great.